If you love making wire, jewellery, and you've never used a jig, here's a little introduction to what it is. A jig is used to form elaborate loops and wire patterns, and you can get them from all sort of craft stores. And it's basically a baseboard with a series of evenly spaced holes and movable pegs with tops of different diameters. And then you can just wrap the wire around the pegs to create a decorative design. And the whole point, this is actually the first jig I ever bought that was sort of put on my table, and you can see it's just this grid. So there's so many different types, but the benefit is that it enables you to replicate the design as many times as you wish. And you can see the pegs come in different diameters, so you just put them into the grid and then you wrap the wire around, and you can buy all these different shapes and sizes. So there's no pegs that are right or wrong. You can see how it just sits like that, and then you would put your pattern in and wrap around. So these are little perspex ones, so obviously you wouldn't be able to make bigger pieces. The one I use the most is probably the metal one. And I've put some sticky, it's sort of blue tack basically, or white tack in fact, and to keep the pegs in place. But you can also buy these little rubber backs that hold the peg in place, because often you'll find when you pull the wire off from your pattern, the pegs come out as well. So you can see how, I've arranged a pattern there, and that's what I can use to duplicate a design. I also think they're fantastic for people who have difficulty using tools. Now, this is a book of mine, Wire and Bead Celtic Jewellery, that was published many years ago. But I think there's about 3 or 4 projects in this book. So it's quite a useful one if you wanted to get a book and follow some patterns. This one has a whole array of different projects in it as well. The cross is definitely one that's formed on a jig, and that's so that you can get the symmetry of the 2 sides. And so there's many patterns in here. This is very Celtic, as you can see. Many patterns in here that you could use to get you started. But otherwise, just getting a jig, see here the patterns. And the useful thing is to get some graph paper, plan out the design that you want, and then work out how you're going to wire wrap around. And that's really all you need to know. Again, I recommend a jig if you've got arthritis in your hands, or if you find it really difficult to use tools and you have a problem shaping, around your round nose pliers. This just gives you that sort of, it helps you always get the same pattern. And if you love making earrings, that is very useful too. So what I would normally do is I'd have a piece of graph paper. I haven't here, but I would have a piece of graph paper. I'd plan out my pattern on a piece of paper, and then I would work out how I'm going to wrap with one continuous wire. So that's without leaving my hand off the paper when I'm drawing it. So I can see that's how I can wire wrap. And then I cut a piece of string and I use that to measure how much wire I will need to create this particular jig pattern that I've designed. So I wrap the string, it's the same sort of gauge as the wire I'm going to use, wrap the string around, and I come back and re-wrap around the first top loop again. And that's going to give me a rough indication of how much wire to cut off my spool. And this is really useful because if you're going to be working in sterling silver, or precious metals, you don't want to waste anything. So there's my measurement. Then I get my wire. I'm going to use copper. This is 0.8 millimeter, so 20 gauge. Cut it to that measurement. In fact, I'm going to cut 2 so I can show you 2 different ways of finishing off. So this is how you could make earrings, because you'd cut the 2 at the same time, you know the measurement. Now, I'm going to start off by making or creating my first link on my round nose pliers. So I make a loop, and that gives me something to anchor on the first peg. Actually, my loop's a bit small. I'm going to have to widen it just slightly. And there it goes. I'm anchored now on the first peg so that the wire is going to sort of stay steady. And then I just pull the wire around, pushing it down to the base plate, going from the inside out and around. So from inside and around each of those pegs to create the pattern that I want. So you can see it's going from around and around. And then I'm going to wrap again around that first peg that I started from. So I'm just going to push the wire. I'm using my tool because I can't get my fingers in there. And that is now wire wrapped. I've used all my wire, and you can see it's pushed down onto the base plate and it snugly fits around those pegs. And now I very carefully lift the wire off the base plate and off the pegs, and I'm left with the design. So there's 2 ways you can finish this off, and I'm going to show you one. So I'm going to cut where that circle is, just cut the excess off basically. And you can see the first link that I made was slightly bigger than the second one because I'd made that with my pliers. So I'm just going to shorten that, make that a bit smaller so that they're both even. And there you have 2 top circles that finish off the unit. The next thing I do, I hammer the edges, only the edges, not where the wires have crossed over, because then you'll weaken the unit. So only go to the very, very ends of those loopy circles and just give that a little, it's really just a stroke hammer. It's not a hard hammer, but that will work hard on it, flatten the piece. And now I'm going to turn the 2 top units or circles to a right angle so that they sit together right at the top. And that's where I can suspend my unit with a jump ring. So I can put a jump ring through those top circles and can suspend it as either an earring, or I can suspend it as a necklace with a chain at the top. So I'm now going to do exactly the same thing, again just to show you a different way of finishing off. So again, I start off with that first circle. That gives me an anchor on the first peg. Then I pull the wire tightly around each of the pegs, going around from the inside out around the pegs to the outside, creating the pattern that I want. And then I come back and finish it off, wrapping the excess wire just around the same top circle, or top peg rather. Push it all down. Always make sure you push it down so that it's not too sort of skewy when you bring it off. It just helps, and it also helps harden it by pushing it down. It helps the unit stay a bit more tough. So I've got the same thing again. I'm going to cut it off, but I'm cutting off a little bit of that top circle that I remade, because this time I only want 1 top link. I'm just leaving enough to make a hook. So can you see there's just a hook there, not a full circle. And that little hook I'm going to secure around the base of that first top link so that it's connected and not open. So the hook is just going round underneath that top circle, and then with tiny, tiny little manipulations, I'm just squeezing that shut. So just squidge, squidge, squidge down. And do that until the wire meets itself. And then you've got a finished sort of secure top, rather than, this is a sort of different look. This one has gone sideways. This, you can see the whole unit, the sort of circular unit at the top. So that's just two ways of how you can finish off the ends. And again, I always just give it a little bit of a stroke hammer, as I say, only on the very, very edges of the exposed wire, not on any crossover wires, because that will just weaken the unit. So it's not a hard hammer, it's just a stroking out, and that makes it nice and tough and strong, and makes sure it doesn't misshape when it's worn. So here you can see that sort of shaping could make the most beautiful dangly earrings. It's like a chandelier effect. You can hang beads, you can hang spirals, you can use them for necklaces, and they just become, these units become very sort of decorative and elaborate. And here's another shape. I've hung other pieces off, other shapes off. You get this lovely, the fact that you can remake the same shape again and again and again. And so if you're worried, if you love making earrings and you're worried about creating, the duplicate of it, the jig is the perfect tool for this. And for pendants, the same. If you like making quite elaborate pieces with suspending, little motifs or charms off them, this is the thing. So here's a little gallery of work for you to look at that will hopefully inspire you if you want to have a go at using a jig. You can wire beads into them, you can use different coloured wires. There's just so much you can do, and I just hope that this gives you a bit of inspiration if you're thinking of getting yourself a jig or using a jig. So have fun and enjoy playing with this fun tool. Many thanks for watching, and please do subscribe. And if you want any particular jig projects, you can always request them by messaging me on my YouTube channel or Facebook or Instagram. Thanks again. Bye for now.